Since the establishment of the colonies in North America, its residents have never failed to let their governing body know when they were unhappy with the decision they made. From 1791 to 1794, a time when a strong centralized government was just forming, we again find ourselves in this sort of conflict. The Whiskey Rebellion became another example of our nation's early members resenting a tax implemented upon them. A tax protest that sparked in 1791, the Whiskey Rebellion was an excise tax placed on distilled spirits in order to reduce foreign debt. This luxury tax would ultimately be the defining moment in victory for the federal government on the basis of civil unrest and protest. The Articles of Confederation was a document utilized as a loose form of governing for the colonies after the American Revolution. With so much chaos between the colonies, a more definite document and a stronger centralized government became a necessity. In the summer of 1787, 55 delegates, who were dispersed among the 13 states, were sent to, in essence, revise the Articles at the first convention. Ultimately, they were thrown out and a new document was created to replace it. The Constitution, ratified on June 21, 1788, now became law. This meant that the federal government was given taxation authority. Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, stemmed off of this power, establishing that the government had 3 types of debt, one of which was foreign debt. As a means to diminish this debt, he proposed a tax on distilled liquor. He believed this was the least objectionable tax the government could levy and as a means to stabilize the economy. Unfortunately, this belief did not resonate well with those on the frontier. They considered this tax as the government targeting Westerners. Small farmers would supplement their income with the profits they made by establishing small distilleries where they produced whiskey. Others would use their excess grain to produce it because it was cheaper and easier to transport. For those who were less fortunate, whiskey was a form of currency, but with the new tax, it was an additional income tax that wealthy Easterners did not have to pay. The method of payment consisted of either paying per gallon or a flat fee. For large distilleries, this fee was an easy decision, while those who had their own distilleries that ran on smaller scales were forced to pay by the gallon because they did not produce enough to pay the flat rate. Small farmers complained that Hamilton's excise tax favored large distillers through this because on average they would pay 3 cents less than the smaller distillers. This unfortunately made the small distilleries less competitive. Resistance was diminished at the climax of 1794 when William Rawle, the federal district attorney, issued subpoenas to more than 60 distilleries in Pennsylvania who evaded the tax. Those who received the document, under the law, were obligated to appear in federal court in Philadelphia. Large resentment erupted in western Pennsylvania, and 7,000 people, who were mostly poor farmers, rallied in Braddock's Field and began to demand independence from the United States or march on Philadelphia. President Washington confronted this group but proceeded with caution. He was determined to establish government authority but did not want to alienate public opinion. Seeking advice from his cabinet on how to deal with such a crisis, he surmised a happy medium between opinions and decided to not only use force but also try to reconcile with them as well. He sent commissioners to meet with the rebels while also congregating with the militia army. During this time, Hamilton publishes essays under the name Tully in Philadelphia newspapers in order to advocate for military action while denouncing mob violence in western Pennsylvania. Washington issued a presidential proclamation on August 7, 1794, announcing that the militia would be called upon to suppress the rebellion. He stated that they should disperse by September 1st. New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, and eastern Pennsylvania were called upon for the militia and created a force of 12,000 men. The rebellion fell without bloodshed as the army marched into western Pennsylvania on October 7, 1794. Many of the leaders of the rebellion either fled or were captured. This uprising and Washington administration's response demonstrated that the new national government was willing and able to suppress violent resistance to its laws. The Whiskey Rebellion brought up civil unrest amongst the newly established country, but also began the solidification of a more influential central government and the notion that this new constitution was now the governing document and the foundation of what would become a much stronger nation.